Her phone buzzed for the 7th time in 20 minutes. She didn't look at it. She was in the middle of a story about her client's chairman, the one who tried to lowball her during contract negotiations, and Bree was already leaning forward with her mouth open, waiting for the punchline. Theo had his wine glass halfway to his lips and hadn't moved it in 30 seconds. Mallory Price kept going. "So he slides this number across the table," she said, dropping her voice like she was sharing classified information. "And I look at it. I look at him. I look back at it. And then I laugh. Not a polite laugh. A real one, like something genuinely funny just happened to me." Bree covered her mouth. "You didn't. I did. And he's sitting there thinking I'm complimenting him. Thinking I'm charmed. Thinking we're having a moment." Mallory picked up her fork, so I slid my counter-proposal back across the table, 40% higher than my original ask. Theo finally took his sip. "Mallory, he signed it, Theo." The table lost it. Her phone buzzed again. She laughed with them. She reached for her wine. Underneath the table, where nobody could see it, her knee was shaking. This was Maison Verlaine, one of the most elegant restaurants in the French Quarter. The kind of place where the lighting is always flattering and the jazz from outside bleeds through the walls just enough to feel romantic without being loud. They were celebrating. She had just closed the biggest consulting contract of her career, a full rebrand of an entire historic New Orleans hotel group. She ordered the good wine. She earned the good wine. Her phone buzzed again. 9 times now. She knew without looking who it was. She had stopped looking 2 weeks ago because looking made it worse somehow. Seeing his name appear on the screen over and over made her feel something she refused to name out loud. Not fear exactly, something older than fear. Something that lived in the stomach and didn't leave when you told it to. "Okay, but what did his face do?" Bree said, still laughing. "When you slid it back?" "He blinked," Mallory said. "Just once. Very slow, like a lizard recalibrating." Theo made a sound that was half laugh, half choke. Her phone buzzed again. Bree glanced at the table. "You're popular tonight." "World's most persistent phone insurance rep," Mallory said without missing a beat. "I have apparently been selected for a very exclusive customer satisfaction survey."
"Block them," Theo said.
"I should," she said. "I really should." She reached over and turned the phone face down, smiled, picked up the menu and started debating the lamb versus the duck out loud, because she needed the table talking about something, and she needed her hands to have something to do, and she needed the next 30 seconds to feel completely normal. Her phone buzzed again. 10 times. She did not turn it back over. What she did instead was lean across the table and tell Bree that if ordered the duck and then had regret about it, Mallory was not available for emotional support because she had warned her, and some lessons had to be lived. Bree said that was cold. Mallory said she was a realist. Theo said they were both exhausting. And underneath the table her knee was still shaking, and in her chest something was pulling tight like a thread being wound around a spool, turn by turn, slowly, steadily, and she smiled through all of it because she was very good at this. She had been practicing this specific skill, keeping her face warm while something else entirely was happening behind it, for the better part of a year. Her phone buzzed. 11. She picked up her glass, laughed at something Theo said, did not look at the door. Then the door opened. She felt it before she saw it. The room didn't go loud. It went quieter. Not silent, just a half-degree drop in the energy, the way a room shifts when something enters that doesn't belong. She felt it the way you feel a change in temperature. Subtle, immediate, undeniable. She looked up. Kevin Ardouin walked in smiling. He was dressed well. He was always dressed well. He had the kind of face that photographed beautifully and moved through rooms easily, the kind of face that made people assume the best about him before he opened his mouth. He scanned the restaurant once, just once, and found her table with the precision of someone who already knew exactly where she was sitting. He started walking toward her. The maitre d' took a step and then hesitated. A waiter moved sideways slightly, that involuntary thing people do when they sense something is wrong but haven't confirmed it yet. Bree's smile dropped. Theo's hand lowered. Mallory did not move. She picked up her wine glass. She took one slow sip. She set it down. And then, from across the restaurant, from a corner table where a man had been sitting quietly with reading glasses and a folder of documents, eating his dinner alone and unbothered, a chair scraped back. A man stood up. His name was Huang Jiang Li. Most people in New Orleans didn't know that name. The ones who moved in hospitality and real estate circles knew it the way you know a weather pattern, by what it produced, not by what it looked like up close. HJL Global operated 43 properties across 12 countries. He was the kind of man whose company made headlines while he personally made none. He was sitting alone at a corner table because that was how he preferred to eat when he was working, reading glasses, a folder, a glass of water and a plate he was getting through slowly. He had noticed Mallory Price the moment she walked in, the way he always noticed her, the way he suspected he always would. He had not approached her table. He had returned to his documents, but he had not put his reading glasses back on. And when the door opened and Kevin Ardouin walked in with that smile, that specific smile that Jiang Li had studied in photographs and security footage for the past several months, he was already standing before he made the conscious decision to stand. He walked across the restaurant, not fast, not slow, just steady. The way a man moves when he's not performing anything, when he has simply decided that he is going to do a thing and his body has agreed. He reached Mallory's table before Kevin did. He sat down beside her, not across, beside, close enough that their arms were almost touching. He looked up at Kevin. "Baby," he said pleasantly, "are we interrupting your dinner?" The word landed in the middle of the room like a stone dropped into still water. Kevin's smile didn't disappear, it fractured. Just slightly. Because he was good at holding expressions, he'd spent years perfecting that, but he hadn't prepared for this. His entire plan for tonight had a very specific shape, and a quiet man in reading glasses sitting beside Mallory and calling her baby was not part of any version of it. Mallory looked at Jiang Li. He looked at her. She made a decision in about 1 second. "No," she said. Her voice was completely steady. "We're not. Kevin was just leaving." She said it like it had already happened. Kevin recovered quickly. He always recovered quickly. He laughed, that social laugh, easy and warm, designed to make everyone around him feel like they were overreacting. "I just stopped by to say congratulations," he said. "I heard about the Beaumont contract through some friends, figured the maitre d' will walk you out." It was Jiang Li, still pleasant, still calm. The sentence wasn't delivered as a threat or a challenge. It was delivered the way you state a fact that everyone in the room already knows is true. The sky is blue, the lamb is excellent. The maitre d' will walk you out. And the maitre d', who had materialized at Kevin's elbow with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood their job very well, extended a hand toward the door. Kevin looked at Jiang Li. He looked at Mallory. He looked around the room where several other diners had stopped pretending not to watch. He left. He was still smiling. But his hands were in fists at his sides, and Mallory saw that. And she filed the way she filed everything, quietly, precisely, without letting it show on her face. The table sat in silence for 4 seconds. Then Bree exhaled, long, shaky, and completely unrestrained. The people at 2 neighboring tables turned around. "I'm sorry," Bree said, pressing her hand to her chest. "I just need a moment." Theo looked at Jiang Li. "Do you want to join us?" "Theo," Mallory said. "I'm just asking." Jiang Li picked up the menu that had been left at the empty seat. "If it's not an imposition." "It's not," Theo said. Mallory said again, in a slightly different tone. "It's genuinely not," Theo said, which was true, and also completely beside the point, which Theo understood but had chosen to overlook. Mallory looked at Jiang Li. He looked back at her with an expression that was patient and calm, and not pushy in any direction. He was waiting for her call. That, more than anything, was what made her nod. "Fine," she said. "But I'm still ordering." "Please do," he said. "The lamb is excellent." Bree made a sound like a compressed squeal. Mallory ordered the lamb. Later, after dinner, after Bree and Theo had said their goodbyes with varying degrees of subtlety, Bree's goodbye involved 3 separate meaningful looks and a very slow walk to the car. Jiang Li walked Mallory to hers. She hadn't asked him to. She hadn't told him not to either. They walked through the French Quarter in the warm night air, past the bar's bleeding music onto the street. and the tourists moving in loose groups, and the locals moving through them like water around rocks. She thanked him properly. He said she didn't have to. Then she stopped walking. "How did you know I was going to be at that restaurant tonight?" He didn't answer immediately. That was the thing about him. He didn't fill silence with words just because silence was uncomfortable. He let it sit. "I'm in New Orleans for a property acquisition," he said. "I saw your car outside when I arrived. I recognized your license plate." She looked at him. It was true. She could see that it was true. She could also see that it wasn't all of it. She filed that too. "Okay," she said. He said. She got in her car and drove home. She sat in her parking garage for 10 minutes before she went upstairs. Not because she was afraid of her apartment. Because she needed those 10 minutes to let her hands stop shaking where no one could see them. She had been doing that a lot lately, finding small private spaces to fall apart in before pulling herself back together, parking garages, bathroom stalls. The 3 minutes before her alarm went off in the morning when she lay in the dark and let herself feel exactly how tired she was before the day started, and she wasn't allowed to feel it anymore. This was what 11 months of Kevin Ardorn had done. Not broken her, she was very clear about that. But it had introduced this new habit, this constant management of her own fear, this performance of okayness that she had to maintain across every surface of her life, because the moment she didn't, the moment she let it show, people would do that thing they always did. "He's just heartbroken, Mal. He loves you. You know how he gets. He's not dangerous. He's just..." You know how men are when they're hurt. She knew how men were when they were hurt. She also knew the difference between hurt and hunting. Nobody wanted to hear that distinction. It made them uncomfortable. So she kept the distinction to herself and kept smiling and kept building her case file, methodically, one time-stamped photograph at a time. The beginning wasn't dramatic. It never is. Kevin Ardorn came from old New Orleans money, the kind of family that had streets named after them and portraits in the hallways of buildings they'd donated to. He was charming in the way that very practiced people are charming, fluid, attentive, good at making you feel like the most interesting person in the room. They dated for 8 months. In the first 4, she thought she'd found someone real. In the second 4, she started counting the small things. The way he'd repeat something back to her, slightly wrong, and then tell her she'd misremembered. The way he'd show up places she hadn't mentioned going to and explain it away easily. He knew her routine. He was in the neighborhood. Wasn't this a nice surprise? The way he'd go quiet out for days after she disagreed with him, a silence that felt less like sadness and more like pressure. She left on a Tuesday. She had planned it for 2 weeks. She waited until she was sure, until the evidence she was collecting in her own head was airtight. And then she packed the things she needed from his place and she left. He called her 14 times that night. She didn't answer. That was 14 months ago. The calls never stopped. They just changed shape. Apologies became explanations, became accusations, became apologies again. He'd go quiet for 3 weeks and she'd start to breathe, and then he'd appear somewhere. Outside her office, in the lobby of a hotel she was consulting for, leaning against her car in a parking garage at 11 at night, saying he just wanted to talk. She filed for a restraining order 8 months in. Her lawyer was good. The process was slow. The courts moved at their own pace, and Kevin's family had lawyers who knew how to use that pace. So she documented. She photographed. She logged every incident with time and location. She was building something that could not be argued with. She was also exhausted. She was also scared. She was also, and this is the part she didn't tell anyone, she was also angry, not at Kevin specifically, at the math of it. That she had to be this precise, this organized, this strategically perfect in her fear just to be believed. That a man could follow her for 11 months and the system's first question was still, but what did he actually do? She was doing everything right and it was still not fast enough. The morning after the restaurant, her phone was slow. She mentioned it to Bree, who mentioned it to her brother, who worked in IT security and took things seriously. He asked her to give him remote access to run a diagnostic. She said yes. He called her back in 40 minutes. His voice was different on the second call, flat, careful. The voice of someone who has found something they didn't want to find and is working out how to say it. "Mallory," he said. There's software on your phone. She sat very still, monitoring software. It's been running for approximately 11 months. Location tracking, message mirroring, call logs. Whoever installed this has been receiving a copy of almost everything that comes through your phone. 11 months, she counted backward. That was before she left. Kevin installed it while they were still together, while she was still in his apartment, while she was planning her exit strategy in what she thought was privacy. He had read it all. Every conversation with her lawyer, every text to Bree where she said she was scared, every time she told Theo she was documenting things, every plan she made. He'd had a front row seat to all of it. She put the phone down on the kitchen table. She opened her laptop. She created a new document and titled it Timeline. Revised, she started typing. This is the thing about Mallory Price that Kevin had never fully understood. Even after 11 months of watching her, he mistook her composure for passivity. He thought because she didn't scream or escalate or perform her distress publicly, she was manageable, containable. He didn't understand that she was building. Hello, family. If you are new here, welcome. Drop a comment right now if you think Mallory should have called the police immediately, or if you think she made the right call going quiet. Because what she does with this information is not what you expect. Her lawyer called her the next afternoon. Not about the spyware. Mallory hadn't told her yet. She was still compiling. The lawyer called about something else. Something that stopped Mallory in the middle of her office hallway, with a water bottle in her hand and her brain suddenly running very fast. Apparently 2 of Kevin's restraining order violations, one near her office building, one near her gym, had been submitted to the court. Time-stamped photographs, clean documentation, professional quality. Her lawyer had assumed Mallory sent them. Mallory had not sent them. She stood in the hallway and did the math. She called Jang Lee. He answered on the second ring. Did you hire someone to watch Kevin? Silence. I hired someone to watch over you, he said. That's not the same thing. Is it not, Mallory? Don't explain it yet. Her voice was quiet. Not cold. Precise. Just answer the question. How long? A pause. 4 months. She nodded to herself, stood there. Okay, I'll call you back. She hung up. She went into the bathroom off the hallway and stood with her back against the door and her eyes on the ceiling, and she breathed, in and out, very slow, because here was the thing. The documentation Jang Lee had collected was useful. It was more than useful. It had moved her case forward in ways that her own documentation hadn't yet managed. He had resources she didn't. A team with equipment and access and no emotional stake in the situation, which meant they were faster and cleaner than she could be. And she was furious. Not because his intentions were wrong. She could see that they weren't. She had known Jang Lee for 3 years, had worked alongside him during a 4-month hotel consultancy project that brought them into the same rooms repeatedly, and she had never once seen him act from cruelty or ego. He was measured, he was thoughtful, he was the kind of man who considered consequences before he took action. He had considered everything except asking her. And that was the thing. That was exactly the thing, because Kevin had also made decisions about her life without asking. Kevin also believed he knew what was best for her. Kevin also had reasons, at least reasons that satisfied himself, for everything he did. The delivery was different. The origin was different. The outcome for her safety was different. But the pattern underneath, someone deciding what Mallory needed without consulting Mallory, that pattern did not care about intentions. She had not escaped one version of it to walk into another, softer version, and call it love. She went back to her office. She had work to do. That evening, she found the article. She had been digging into HJL Global's history, not for professional reasons this time. She was trying to understand who Hwang Jang-Lee was beneath the company profile. She pulled old interviews, business filings, a few profiles from Korean publications that she had translated. Most of it was what she expected. Careful, measured language, a man who gave nothing away unnecessarily. Then she found a piece in a Korean business journal from 12 years ago. The translation was rough in places, but clear enough. There was a section, brief, almost parenthetical, that referenced a period when Jang Lee was 19. His mother, a university professor, had been stalked by a former colleague for nearly 2 years. The family handled it privately at first, then legally, then, when the legal channels failed, through the media. The article quoted Zhang Li's mother years later, saying it had been the loneliest period of her life. Not because no one helped, because no one believed her until there was so much evidence that they couldn't avoid it anymore. Zhang Li was the one who stayed, who documented, who drove her to work and logged every incident and eventually went to a journalist when everything else ran out. He was 19. Mallory read the article 3 times. She did not call him. She sat at her desk and looked at the wall for a while and thought about the particular way that people carry the things they've witnessed when they were young and helpless. How those things don't leave, how they resurface as action, sometimes as overreach, when you finally have the power to do something that you didn't have before. She thought about that. She also thought about the fact that understanding something and accepting it were 2 different things. She closed her laptop and went to bed and did not sleep well. Kevin's next move came on a Wednesday. He showed up at the Beaumont, her hotel, the one she was rebuilding from the inside out, and walked up to the front desk and told the manager on duty that he was Mallory's partner and had an urgent message to deliver. He said it easily, naturally, the way you say something you've rehearsed until it sounds like breathing. The manager, a sharp woman named Cecile who had worked that desk for 11 years and prided herself on reading people accurately, felt something wrong immediately. She couldn't have named it. She just knew. She smiled at Kevin, told him she'd let Miss Price know he was here, and picked up the phone to call Mallory the moment he turned toward the lobby seating. Mallory arrived 22 minutes later with her lawyer. And Officer LeBlanc, who was one of the few people in the New Orleans Police Department who had looked at Mallory's documentation file and not made the face that said, "Is this really enough for us to do something?" LeBlanc had made a different face. She'd made the face that said, "I've seen this before, and I know how it ends if we don't move." That face had made Mallory feel, for the first time in months, like she was not doing this completely alone. Kevin saw them walk in together, and for just a moment, brief, almost invisible, something moved across his face that wasn't the smile. Something that looked like calculation. Like someone updating a model, he was escorted out, with witnesses, with documentation, with a formal incident report that added to the restraining order file in a way his lawyers were going to have a harder time explaining around. As he was leaving, right at the door, close enough that only she could hear, he turned to her and said, "He's not what you think he is, either. Ask him about the Beaumont deal." Then he walked out, still smiling. Mallory stood in the lobby of her hotel and looked at the door he'd just walked through and counted to 5 inside her head. Then she said to Cecile, "Thank you for calling me." Cecile said, "Always," Mallory said. "The flower arrangement in the east lobby is crooked. Can we fix that before the afternoon walkthrough?" Cecile blinked. "Of course." Mallory walked toward the elevator. She waited until she was inside it, alone, doors closed. Then she straightened up, pressed the button for floor, pulled out her phone. She didn't ask him directly. That wasn't how she worked. She went sideways, the way she always did. She called a contact at a New Orleans business journal, a journalist named Perry who had been covering the city's hospitality and real estate sectors for 15 years and who answered her questions when she asked because she'd given him 3 good tips over the years and he respected the exchange. She asked about HJL Global's acquisition activity from the past year. Perry got quiet in a way that meant he knew something. He told her HJL Global had put in a strong bid for the Beaumont Group 6 months before Mallory's firm was brought in as consultants. They were considered the front-runner, and then 2 months before the final decision they withdrew, voluntarily. No public explanation. She asked if there was a private explanation. Perry said, "I heard it through 2 different people, so take it for what it is." Someone inside HJL flagged a conflict of interest. Something about a consultant connected to the deal having a personal connection to an HJL executive. She thanked Perry, hung up, sat with it. She was the consultant. HJL Global had walked away from a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Voluntarily, quietly, without telling anyone why, so that her path to the biggest contract of her career was clean. Huang Zhangli had done that. without telling her, without asking her if she wanted it. She sat in her office chair and looked at the ceiling and felt something she didn't have a clean word for. It wasn't gratitude, it wasn't anger exactly. It was something that lived between those two things, in the complicated territory where someone's love for you and their disrespect for your autonomy exist at the same time, and you have to hold both without letting either one swallow the other. She picked up her phone, put it back down, picked it up again. She was going to his hotel. This conversation was not happening over a phone. She drove to the Monteleone. She didn't call ahead. She walked through the lobby, bar where people were laughing over cocktails, and a man in the corner was playing piano, and she took the elevator to the 8th floor and knocked on his door. He opened it. He looked at her face and said nothing, just stepped back to let her in. She walked into the room, stood in the middle of it. He closed the door and stood near it, giving her space, which she noticed. "You pulled out of the Beaumont acquisition," she said. "Yes. You had someone documenting Kevin for 4 months. Yes, you were already at that restaurant when I got there. Yes, and you made every one of those decisions without telling me." He didn't answer that one immediately. He moved to the chair near the window and sat down. She stayed standing. "Do you understand?" she said, and her voice was even almost academic, the voice she used in boardrooms when she needed people to actually hear her, that I left a man who also believed he was protecting me. Kevin also had reasons. Kevin also thought he knew what I needed. The thing that made living with him suffocating, the actual core of it, the thing that was slowly taking me apart, was that I had no say in anything. He made the map and expected me to walk it and called it love. Zhang Li listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't shift or look away. He held the full weight of what she was saying. "I understand," he said. "Say it like you actually mean it, not like it's a concession." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, I made decisions about your safety without your knowledge, because I was afraid of what would happen if I wasn't watching. I know what happens when someone is alone in that kind of situation and no one takes it seriously, and I let that fear make the decision instead of asking you. I know that regardless of what I intended, I removed your ability to choose, and that's the same injury, dressed differently." She stared at him. "I know about your mother," she said. Something moved across his face, not a flinch, more like a door opening inward briefly. "I found the article," she said, "the one from 12 years ago. I had it translated." He looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. "She never asked for help," he said quietly. "She kept saying she was handling it. And then one night it escalated, and I almost started again. I decided a long time ago that I would never stand by and watch that happen to someone He stopped again. "Someone you what?" He looked at her steadily. "Someone I care about." Mallory crossed her arms, not defensively, thoughtfully. "I know why you did it, Zhang Li. I actually understand it better than you probably expected me to. But here's the thing." She uncrossed her arms. "I am not your mother. I am not a situation to be managed. And you don't get to love me in secret. You don't get to protect me in secret. If you want to be in my life, actually in it, you come to me. You tell me. You ask." She picked up her bag from where she'd set it. "Figure out if you can do that," she said, "because I can't do the other version, not again. I know what that version costs and I'm not paying it twice." She walked to the door, she opened it, she stopped. "The lamb really was excellent," she said, and she left. If you're still watching, drop a comment right now. Team Mallory walking away or Team Give Zhang Li a chance. I need to know your thoughts. 3 days later, Kevin's lawyer released a statement to a local blog. It was carefully written, precise in the way that malicious things are precise when someone has spent time engineering them. It suggested, without stating outright, because stating outright had legal consequences, that Mallory's stalking claims were exaggerated. That she was a woman who had ended a relationship badly and was now leveraging a narrative for professional sympathy. That her sudden closeness with a Korean billionaire in the weeks following her ordeal was convenient timing worth examining. The blog ran it with a headline designed to plant doubt without proving anything. That was the point. You didn't have to prove something to damage it. You just had to make people wonder. Mallory read it in her car, parked outside the Beaumont. at 7:15 in the morning. She read it once. She put her phone down on the passenger seat. She looked through the windshield at the front entrance of her hotel, the one she had spent months rebuilding, and she let herself be angry for exactly 60 seconds. Full, clean, unperformed anger. The kind she never let anyone see because the moment a woman like her showed anger, it became the story instead of what caused it. 60 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and sent 3 texts. To Bree, clear my afternoon. To her lawyer, offensive strategy. Today, to Theo, I need the documentation folder, all of it. Then she called Perry at the Business Journal. She said, I have a story for you, on the record. My name on it, all of it. Perry said, how much is all of it? 11 months, the documentation. The spyware, the restraining order violations, the incident at the Beaumont, everything. Silence on the line. Then, Mallory, if we run this, he's going to come back hard. He's already coming back hard, she said. The difference is that right now he's doing it in the dark. I'm turning the lights on. Perry said, give me 2 days to verify and structure, she said. You have one. She got out of the car, straightened her jacket, walked into her hotel. Cecile looked up from the front desk. Morning, Mallory said. Is the coffee in the back office fresh? Made it 10 minutes ago. Good. I'm going to need it. The story ran 31 hours later. It ran with documentation. Time-stamped photographs, the spyware report from the IIT specialist, the restraining order filing, the incident reports, the communications log. Perry had done the work properly. He'd given Kevin's legal team the standard hours to comment, received a statement that said, these allegations are categorically false, published that statement in full, and then published everything else beside it. The thing about evidence is that it doesn't need help. You just have to show it. What Perry also found, through the reporting process, through a source who contacted him after the story was announced and before it published, was something Mallory hadn't known. 3 years before he met Mallory, Kevin had done this before. A different woman, a quieter situation. His family had been notified, had hired lawyers immediately, and had settled with the woman privately and fast. She'd signed an NDA. The family had buried it deep enough that it took a journalist with 15 years of New Orleans sources to find the edge of it. Kevin Ardoin was not a heartbroken man. He was a pattern, and his family had known. Perry ran that too. By the evening of publication day, Mallory's phone had 142 messages in it. Journalists, former colleagues, women she hadn't spoken to in years who had things to say that they'd never said before. She read through a portion of them with Bree sitting across the desk, who was trying to maintain a professional expression and not quite managing it. Mal, Bree said. I see it. Are you okay? Mallory looked at her. I have been okay for 11 months. I was okay when I was scared. I was okay when nobody believed me. I've been building toward okay this whole time. She looked back at the screen. This is just okay with company now. Bree made the face she made when she was trying not to cry. I'm going to get more coffee. Please. Kevin's lawyer issued 2 more statements over the following 48 hours. Both of them landed badly. The first tried to reframe the documented stalking incidents as misunderstandings between 2 people who had a complicated history. The second tried to question the credibility of the spyware report. Perry had anticipated both and had the IT specialist on record for the second one, which dismantled it cleanly. The Ardoin family went quiet after that. Their lawyers were still moving. These things didn't stop them moving, just because the public narrative had shifted. But the shape of it had changed. Kevin was now dealing with criminal exposure for the spyware installation, which was not a civil matter, and not something family money could simply settle. His previous victim's lawyer had contacted Mallory's lawyer the day the story ran. The NDA she'd signed had clauses that were now being examined in light of how the family had used it. Kevin Ardoin stopped smiling. Not publicly. Publicly he maintained everything. But there were photographs from the following week, taken by someone who hadn't been hired by anyone. Just a city photographer who happened to be in the right place, that showed him leaving his family's lawyer's office, with a face that had finally, after all this time, stopped performing. Mallory saw those photographs. She did not feel triumphant. She felt something quieter than that. Something that was more like the exhale she'd been holding for 11 months finally being allowed to leave her body. She had not spoken to Jiang Li since the hotel room. He had not called. He had not texted. He had not sent anything through any of the channels available to a man with his resources, which told her that he was taking what she said seriously enough to actually do nothing for a while instead of filling the silence with effort. She noticed that. On the 4th day after the story ran, she got a call from the Beaumont's front desk. Not Cecile, the evening manager, a quiet man named Hugo who had worked there longer than anyone. He told her that a letter had been dropped off for her, hand-delivered, by a man who had asked that it only be passed along if she specifically asked for it. She sat with that for a moment. Did the man leave a name, she asked. No, ma'am, Hugo said, but he left his business card in case you had questions about the letter. She asked Hugo to read her the name on the card. He did. She was quiet for a beat. I'll come get it tomorrow, she said. She came that evening. She took the envelope upstairs to her office on the 3rd floor, her temporary workspace while the main offices were being renovated, and she sat at her desk and opened it. The letter was handwritten, 3 pages. The handwriting was precise and controlled for the first page and a half. Then, somewhere around the middle of the 2nd page, it shifted, became slightly less even, not messy, just human, like the hand was being asked to write something the mind had never fully let itself think before. She didn't read it aloud, and we won't repeat it here because some things belong to the person they were written for, but she read it in full, twice. She reached the part about his mother, a passage near the bottom of the 2nd page, and she stopped moving for a while. He had never written any of this down before. That was clear from the way the pen moved. This was the first time these particular sentences had existed on paper, which meant he had written them specifically for her, which meant something she wasn't entirely ready to name yet. She folded the letter, put it in the inside pocket of her bag. Close, she sat in the office for a while. The French Quarter was doing what it always does in the evening, filling up, warming up, the music starting to find its way through every gap in every wall. New Orleans at night sounded like a city that had survived everything and decided to celebrate anyway. She had always loved that about this place. It didn't pretend the hard things hadn't happened. It just kept playing. She pulled out her phone. She sent one text, Maison Verlaine. 7, same table. She pressed send. She waited. He replied in under a minute. I'll be there. She put her phone away. She had work to finish tonight. The Beaumont rebrand had 3 outstanding proposals and a contractor meeting in the morning. She pulled up her laptop, found her place, and kept going. She got to the restaurant first. Same table, same candles, the jazz from outside bleeding through the walls at the same comfortable volume. She ordered a glass of wine and opened her notebook and reviewed projections for the Beaumont rebrand while she waited, because that was who she was. She didn't perform waiting, she used it. He arrived at 7 exactly. She heard his footsteps and didn't look up. The lamb, she said. You were right about the lamb. He sat down across from her, not beside her, across, visible, level. I know, he said. She looked up. He looked the same as he always did, composed, unhurried. But something in him was different tonight, less defended. Like a man who had written something true on paper for the first time, and found that doing so had changed the shape of him slightly. She closed her notebook. I read the letter twice, she said. I figured you would. The part about your mother, she paused. You've been carrying that for a long time. He looked at the table for a moment, then back at her. Yes, it doesn't excuse what you did, I know, but it explains it. And explanation is not nothing. She picked up her wine glass. I also know that you withdrew from the Beaumont acquisition. I figured that out about 4 days ago. He nodded. I want you to know, she said carefully, that I am not sure how to feel about that yet. It was a lot of money. It was your business decision to make. But it was also my career, and you shaped something that was supposed to be entirely mine without telling me, and I have to sit with that. That's fair. I also want you to know, she set the glass down, that closing that deal was the best professional moment of my life. And it was real. Whatever you chose to do on your end, what I built was mine. I need that to be separate. It is, he said. It was always separate. You earned that contract on your own. I just He stopped. I removed myself from your path. That's different from putting something in it. She thought about that. It's a thin line. It is, he said. I know that. She looked at him for a moment. This man who had sat across rooms from her for 3 years, who had told her quietly, one evening after a long day of meetings, that he felt something for her, and when she'd said no, had said okay and had meant it with his behavior, even if not entirely with his heart, who had, in the months that followed, made choices she hadn't asked for out of a fear that was older than her, rooted in a 19-year-old boy who'd had to watch helplessly before he could do anything. She wasn't going to let that boy make decisions for her, but she could see him, and seeing someone was not the same as giving them a pass. It was just the beginning of deciding whether the work was worth it. You're going to have to tell me things, she said, out loud, in real time, not after. Not once you've already decided. Before. I know, and when you slip, because you will, this is not a personality trait that disappears overnight. I'm going to call it out, clearly, and you're going to hear it without getting defensive. I'll hear it, and if this doesn't work, it might not, he said, without softness, without deflection, just the plain truth of it. I'm aware of that. She looked at him. Okay, she said. She opened the menu. He picked up his. They sat in the warm light of Maison Verlaine while New Orleans moved and breathed and played music through the walls, and they talked about the Beaumont renovation, a property he was developing in Busan. The argument she and Theo had been having for 2 years about whether New Orleans or Seoul had better late-night food. Small things, real things. The kind of things two people talk about when they are deciding, carefully, without rushing, whether to trust each other. Kevin Ardouin faced criminal charges for the spyware installation. His family's prior settlement was unsealed. 2 lawyers, and 4 months later, the woman who had signed the NDA was released from it. She made a statement. It was brief, and she didn't owe anyone more than that. The Beaumont Hotel relaunched 8 months later. The event was covered in 3 national publications. The photographs showed Mallory Price in the lobby of her hotel, arms crossed. The caption in one of the pieces read, "She doesn't rebuild, she builds better." Bree framed it and put it in the office. Theo said it was too much. Bree said nothing in this city was ever too much. Mallory said they were both right, which meant they were both wrong, and told them to get back to work. They did. She did too. My loves, if this story held you all the way to the end, it's supposed to. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and tell me the moment that hit you hardest.